Howdy mates, how are we doing? Here's a part 2 video over at the Highlands Hammock State Park. Actually right now I'm walking along what's known as the Sweetgum Trail that also connects to a portion known as the Ancient Oak Trail, if I remember my names correctly. But it's another portion of the park that you can go hiking and do some exploring. So part of the reason I wanted to do this video is also provide another glimpse of what natural Florida truly embraces, at least in Central Florida. And I tell you, the weather today is absolutely amazing. I mean, it's only, like right now, maybe in the upper 60s, lower 70s, with no humidity. Sorry to my fellow northerners, I'm not trying to rub it in too much, but sorry, not sorry. So, the type of setting that we're in right now is known as a hammock. So, essentially, in a hammock, it's kind of like a southern equivalent to a forest, basically. But it's not all woods either. You have a mixture of different types of plants, shrubs, trees, as I just discussed, and even monocots. Now, I say monocots, what do you think, what comes to mind? Now, when I say monocot, I'm not necessarily referring to the camping cot that we use. Point in fact, I actually used it during my trip to northern Florida, funny enough. Rather, a monocot suggests the type of seed structure that a plant has. So, essentially with a monocot, there's only one particular cotyledon. That's essentially what makes up the term monocot. So there's only one single sprout, and that's it. And then of course, aside from monocots, you also have dicots. So with dicots, you instead have two cotyledons, or two sprouts, among the first germination of the plant. But I'm not going to go too in depth, but the point is, a great example of monocots include grasses. And usually a good way to know if you're looking at a monocot is you got to look at the veins. So we're going to take this cabbage palm, for example, right? This is basically like a sapling. So if you look carefully, you can see along the frond here, I want to see how well the camera actually does. I actually recently got a newer phone, so I'm just trying to see if it can focus in. Well, it's a little better than my old phone. But you can see on that particular frond, the veins are parallel. Whereas dicots, which most trees are dicots, their veins are typically branching off of one another. Or they can be a bit more what you call concentric. So technically, in a biological sense, when we say palm tree, it's actually not entirely accurate. Essentially, all palms throughout the world, I just mentioned one particular species, they're all essentially grasses on steroids. But what makes it even more wild about it is like some of our flowers, for example, like the coreopsis, which is like the Florida tick seed, That's like the more common name, but it goes by the genus of Coreopsis. That particular flower, wildflower, is actually, it's a dicot. So it's more related to our trees, but they look nothing like trees. They're just little flowers. So it's wild to think about, because you'd certainly think that the palms would be related to trees, but they're not. And for another, palms, they don't have solid, durable wood. Instead, it's more like a spongy structure on the inside. And that's actually where we get our hearts of palm from. And you can also find sweetgum out here. Sweetgum it's tricky to find sometimes, just because of how subtropical it gets. It gets hot. And sweetgum is more of a common deciduous tree. And we have a bunch right up here. They're always distinguished by producing these little spike balls. I'm going to try to see. Give me just a second. Here we go. I wanted to save some time on the video, so I had to pause it for a second. But here are their blooms. Well, this one's already passed, but essentially these carry the seeds for the next generation. The seeds have already been spread, more or less, because you can actually see the little openings on the inside here. It doesn't want to zoom in. But this is what the fruit looks like right here. And normally they're green, so this one's been on the ground for quite some time. But the leaves, they look very similar. I think I just saw one earlier. Give me another second. Perfect. Here we go. We actually got our sample of a leaf. So they do have a palmate formation, or I should say leaf arrangement, to be more technical. They call it palmate just because it resembles the palm of someone's hand. So they look very similar, somewhat, to the buckeye tree, even though you won't find those down here. They're not the same tree. But nevertheless, it is cool to find them down here. So that just goes to show sweetgum tends to thrive in areas that have been untouched. And for another, they're very tolerant of nutrient-poor soil. So there aren't many deciduous trees that have that particular tolerance down here in Florida. So that's another thing too. Trees, the types of trees that you see, can actually indicate the type of soil that you have in terms of the pH, for example, or nutrient content. So I would lie if I said that nature is not interconnected. It truly is. You just gotta think outside the box. So, alright. The video is getting a little long, so I'm gonna wrap this up. Alright, you guys, take care. Have a good one.